On the 21st of June, the private pool water at the Osei estate in Shelter Island was exactly 81 degrees when my 7-year-old sister went under. I spent my next 30 years locked in a sanitarium because my husband Gabriel said I held her head down, but now I was standing in front of the same estate gateway on June 1st with a clean swimming instructor certification in my hand. Did they think they could hide her under the water twice? My sister Cleo was supposed to have a future filled with paint brushes and messy canvases. Instead, she became a tiny file in a cold cabinet in Suffolk County, marked as an accidental drowning with suspicious family involvement. The cold ocean breeze coming off the harbor whipped my hair across my face, tasting of salt and metal. My skin felt too tight, humming with the static of a timeline that had not happened yet but lived in my bones like a disease. I could still smell the damp concrete of the basement ward, where they kept me chemically paralyzed. I could still feel the phantom pinch of the needle in my shoulder every time Gabriel came to visit me, smiling as he signed the papers to liquidate another block of my family's shipping inheritance. I was 26 years old again. My joints did not ache from institutional restraints, my mind was not clouded by antipsychotics, and my father's fortune was still intact. I had returned to the exact month when everything fell apart. To everyone else on Long Island, Anais Larkspur was a grieving young woman who had recently lost her father and was desperately trying to keep her ancestral shipping company afloat. To my fiancé, Gabriel Osei, I was an asset to be harvested. Gabriel was a junior partner at a corporate restructuring firm, specializing in identifying weak family trusts and bleeding them dry under the guise of legal defense. He had spent 2 years carving away my self-confidence, planting seeds of doubt in my mind about my own sanity, and pushing me toward the edge. He had introduced me to Delphine Kowalski, a brilliant water safety consultant and pool architect who was hired to redesign our estate beach club. She was aristocratic, spoke with a subtle Polish accent, and possessed eyes as hard as slate. I had trusted them both when they told me my sister Cleo needed intensive, private swimming lessons at the newly designed Olympic-size club pool. In my first life, I slept late on the 21st of June, because Gabriel had mixed a sedative into my chamomile tea. When I woke up, the security guards were already pulling Cleo's stiff body out of the deep end. The club's security footage from that afternoon had been useless. There was a 40-square-foot blind spot near the diving boards, caused by a design flaw in the overhanging steel pavilion that Delphine had personally designed. I had tried to tell the police that Gabriel had been holding my sister's legacy papers in his briefcase, but they looked at my talk screen and my hysterical face and chose his quiet voice instead. They said I was the one who left the security gate open. They said my fingerprints were on her wet floating board. Now, standing on the pool deck as the newly hired morning lifeguard and assistant swim coach under a pseudonym, I smelled the fresh chlorine. My fingers gripped the clipboard so tightly my knuckles turned gray. "Are you looking for the head lifeguard, miss?" a deep voice asked from behind me. I spun around, my lungs squeezing shut in a physical reflex of defense, but it was not Gabriel. It was Xavier Beaumont, a minority partner of the beach club board and the lead forensic auditor who had tried in vain to trace the missing Larkspur assets after my institutionalization in my past life. In that future, he had arrived too late with his ledger of evidence, finding only my empty hospital bed after my heart gave out under their forced drugging. Now, he was younger, his dark hair untouched by gray, looking at me with sharp, assessing brown eyes. "I am the new swim instructor," I said, keeping my voice cool and flat. "Anais Larkspur. I am using my real name because Gabriel needs to know I am close, but I am registered under my mother's maiden name for the payroll system." Xavier frowned, adjusting his silver rimless glasses. He looked down at my credentials. "You do not look like a woman who wants to teach children how to kick their legs, Miss Larkspur. You look like you are searching for a crime scene." "You have no idea how accurate that is, Mr. Beaumont," I whispered. "I need you to sign off on my authorization to check the pool maintenance sheds and the security camera feeds this week." Xavier stepped closer, his shadow falling over me. He smelled of pine wood and old paper, a clean contrast to the heavy sandalwood cologne Gabriel always wore. Why would a member of the Larkspur family need to inspect security cameras of a pool she owns 40% of? "Because a camera is only as good as the person who designs its blind spots," I said, looking him dead in the eye. "If you value your family's shares in this club, you will let me do my job without asking your board members." Xavier watched me for a long beat, his thumb tracing the edge of his pocket watch. He felt like an anchor in a rushing current. "Very well," he said quietly. "But if I find you tampering with the fiber optic lines, I will have to report it to the county commissioner." He left me alone on the deck, but I knew his eyes remained on my back from the upper pavilion window. He was watching me because he already suspected Gabriel's financial firm was doing something illegal with the club trust accounts. The next morning, under the cover of the 5 o'clock fog, I slipped into the pump house. I carried a black leather bag containing 4 military-grade micro cameras with custom marine casings, purchased with cash from an independent surveyor in New Jersey. My chest throbbed with a dull ache as I climbed onto the concrete ledge overlooking the pool. I remembered the exact day of Cleo's funeral, the way Gabriel had adjusted my black veil, whispering that we should let the shipping company go to pay for my psychiatric care. My hands did not shake as I drilled the first microscopic mount into blue tiled trim beneath the overhanging steel beam. This was the blind spot. From the high-angle security booth, the camera saw only a distorted reflection of water due to the sun bouncing off the metal pavilion roof. But from here my camera would catch every detail at eye level, direct and undeniable. I ran the paper-thin fiber lines down the side of the overflow gutter, sealing them with marine silicone that dried transparent. My fingers were raw, my palms scraping against the rough concrete. By the afternoon, the heat index reached 90 degrees. Gabriel was scheduled to bring Cleo for her private session with Delphine. I sat in the high chair, wearing my red uniform, sunglasses shielding my eyes. From this height I saw them walk through the gate. Gabriel looked exactly as he did when he destroyed me. He wore a crisp white linen shirt, a gold watch glinting on his wrist, and that soft, deceptive smile that made everyone believe he was a savior. Delphine was beside him, wearing a dark blue swimsuit that matched the water, her hair pulled back into a tight bun. And behind them, clutching a yellow float and wearing a pink swimsuit, was Cleo. She was singing to herself, her small legs moving in hops as she tried to avoid the hot concrete. The sight of her made my heart violently hammer against my ribs. A wave of physical nausea hit me so hard I had to grip the metal railing of the lifeguard tower to keep from falling. She was alive, she was warm. "Anais," Gabriel called out, looking up at me. He did not know I had taken the guard shift. "What are you doing up there? I thought you were at the office signing the probate letters." The probate letters were the documents that would transfer the management of Larkspur Shipping's offshore assets to Gabriel's trust. In my past life I had signed them on June 10th, thinking it would ease my stress. I climbed down the ladder slowly, every movement deliberate. I wanted to look professional, untouched by his presence. "The probate documents had a small typo, Gabriel," I said, my voice steady. "My legal counsel advised me to hold off until the board meets next week." Gabriel's smile didn't fade, but the skin around his eyes tightened. Delphine looked away, her fingers drumming against her clipboard. "Your counsel?" Gabriel asked, his voice dripping with mock concern. "Anais, darling, your father's partners are trying to push you out. I am the only one looking out for your interests. You shouldn't make legal decisions when you are still this fragile." "I am not fragile," I said. I looked past him to Cleo, who was already dipping her toes in the shallow water. Delphine stepped in, her accent smooth and sharp. "We have a lot of work to do today, Anais. The summer league starts next week and Cleo's stroke is still very weak. She tends to panic in deep water." "She does not panic," I said. "She just needs someone who actually wants her to swim." Delphine gave a small, chilling laugh. "I am a certified instructor, darling. I think I know what she needs." I watched them take Cleo to the deep end, right beneath the steel pavilion. From the tower, I kept my hand on my pocket receiver, which was streaming live video from the hidden camera straight to a secure hard drive in Xavier's office downstairs. But as I watched, my chest grew tight. My past life knowledge told me that Gabriel was supposed to go to the city on June 10th to meet with his shell company lawyers. I had planned to use that day to break into his apartment on 72nd Street to download his financial ledgers. On the morning of June 10th, I stood inside Gabriel's bedroom, using the duplicate key I had made 3 weeks ago. My fingers swept through his oak desk, finding his personal computer. I inserted the decrypting USB that Xavier's team had quietly helped me format under the guise of an audit query. My eyes scanned the green status bar on the screen. Suddenly, the front door lock clicked. A cold sweat broke out over my collarbone. Gabriel was not supposed to be here. He was supposed to be in Manhattan at an SEC compliance meeting. I scrambled behind the heavy velvet drapes just as the door swung open. It was not Gabriel alone. Delphine's voice echoed in the hallway, high and breathless. Did you secure the Larkspur probate files yet? The buyers from the German conglomerate are getting impatient. They want the shipping routes by the end of the month. I have them, Gabriel said. His voice was different now. It lacked the soft, caring tone he used with me. It was hard, metallic, and vicious. But Anais is acting strange. She hired a new lawyer look at the offshore structures. Who? Delphine asked. That useless academic, Xavier Beaumont, Gabriel hissed. He is digging into the club's capital funds. We need to speed up the timeline. If the sister has her accident this week, Anais will be too broken to care about any lawyer. My throat went bone dry. They were moving the drowning up. It was not going to happen on the 21st. They were going to do it sooner. My hand brushed against the heavy brass curtain tie. It made a small, distinct metallic clinking sound against the floor. Who is in there? Gabriel called out. The sound of his leather shoes approaching the drapes was agonizingly slow. I could hear my own pulse thumping in my ears, a loud, heavy drum. I reached into my pocket, my fingers wrapping around my small emergency pepper spray, but my muscles felt completely frozen. This was the failure of my foresight. By changing my behavior, I had compressed their timeline and put myself in the corner. Just as Gabriel reached the edge of the drape, a sharp alarm began to blare from the driveway outside. A car alarm. Specifically, the horn of my rented sedan, which I had parked 2 blocks away but apparently had its panic button triggered. Gabriel stopped. He turned to the window. Some idiot is blocking the garage entrance. Let's go through the basement door. We cannot afford to have the neighbors see us leaving together before the audit is complete. I heard them retreat down the back stairs. My breath rushed out of me in a ragged, shaking sob. I crawled out from behind the drapes and ran to the window. Down on the street, standing next to my rented car with his key fob in his hand, was Xavier Beaumont. He looked up at the window, gave a brief, barely perceptible nod, and walked away. 2 hours later, we met at a small diner near the train station, far away from the old money estates of Shelter Island. The diner smelled of greasy bacon and cheap vinegar. You were almost caught, Xavier said, setting down a cup of black coffee. He looked at me with an intensity that made me want to look away. I saw your car parked near his building. I knew Gabriel's schedule had changed because his firm filed an emergency motion at the federal court in Brooklyn this morning. He warned them, I said, my voice shaking as I held the mug. He is going to kill her, Xavier. They are going to drown Cleo in the club pool. They are moving it up because they know we are looking at their shell accounts. Xavier reached across the booth. His fingers were warm as they briefly touched my wrist. They were strong, steady, and did not demand anything from me. We have the transfer files you pulled from his drive, he said. They show $3 million moved from your father's trust into an offshore company controlled by Delphine Kowalski. But we need physical proof of their intent to harm your sister. Financial fraud is a white-collar crime. It takes years to prosecute. If you want them put away before they can touch Cleo, you need them caught in the act. And we will, I said, my voice hardening. They do not know about the underwater cameras. On June 12th, the weather was gray and stormy. The beach club was empty, the dark water of the pool rippling under the heavy rain. I sat in the security shack watching the monitor. Cleo had been brought in for a special makeup session by Gabriel, who told me he had a board meeting inside the clubhouse. My hand was hovering over the digital recording interface. My secret cameras were streaming perfectly. I saw Delphine guide Cleo to the deep end. The water was rough, the surface distorted by the wind and rain. You are going to swim to the other side today, Cleo, Delphine said, her voice carrying through the outdoor PA system which I had secretly left open. No boards. She is not ready, I whispered to myself, my chest tightening. Delphine took Cleo's foam board and tossed it toward the shallow end. She then reached down and appeared to adjust the straps on Cleo's small life vest. But through the microscopic camera lens beneath the waterline, I saw her hands. Delphine's manicured fingers were not tightening the straps. She was pulling the plastic safety pins from the quick-release valves on the vest, leaving it loosely draped over my sister's shoulders. Then she gave Cleo a gentle, but firm push toward the deep center. Go on, Cleo, show Gabriel how strong you are. Cleo hit the water. Within 3 seconds, the loose vest slipped over her head, her tiny arms flailing uselessly in the cold, deep water. Delphine immediately stepped back, her boots clicking on the wet concrete. She did not yell for help. She did not grab the life pole. She walked slowly toward the pavilion stairs, her face cold, eyes fixed on her watch. Through the pool camera, I saw Cleo sink below the surface. her small hand reaching upward toward the gray light, just like she had 30 years ago in that terrible dark memory. A scream tore from my throat, but it was not a scream of panic. It was a scream of raw, cold fury. I did not run to the security booth door to scream at Gabriel. I did not make a scene. I ran out of the guard shack, hit the wet concrete deck, and dove straight into the cold, chemical-scented water before Delphine could even reach the clubhouse doors. I swam with every ounce of muscle in my body, my arms cut through the chlorinated water, my lungs burning with the memories of 30 years of confinement. I saw Cleo's pink suit drifting toward the bottom near the filter drain. I reached her, my hands wrapped around her waist, pulling her upward. When we broke the surface, I held her head high, checking her mouth. She was coughing, vomiting pool water onto my chest, her little fingers clawing at my shoulder. She was breathing. She was alive. I hauled her onto the deck, wrapping my own body around her to keep her warm in the cold rain. Delphine was standing 10 yards away, her face pale, her lips parted in shock. "Anais, what are you doing?" She slipped. She had an accident. I did not yell at her. I did not threaten her. I simply stood up, holding Cleo in my arms, and looked Delphine in the eye. "Get out of my way," I said. My voice was like ice. Gabriel came running out of the pavilion, his leather shoes slipping on the wet deck. "What happened?" "Anais, you were supposed to be at the front desk. Is Cleo all right?" I ignored him completely, walking straight past him towards Xavier, who was waiting at the side gate with his car engine running. We did not go to the police yet. We went to Xavier's house on the harbor, where his legal team had set up a private room. We kept Cleo dry, warm, and safe under the care of a trusted private pediatrician. For the next 24 hours, we stayed completely silent. Gabriel sent me 12 frantic text messages, pretending to be a worried fiancé. He called the hospital, but we were not there. He thought we were hiding in terror, just like I had 30 years ago. He and Delphine believed they had successfully cracked my resolve, that I was on the verge of another breakdown. On June 14th, the Suffolk County Probate Court was holding a special administrative hearing to determine the custody of the Larkspur shipping trusts. Because I was declared missing from my primary residence by Gabriel, he had petitioned the judge for an emergency temporary conservatorship, citing my unstable emotional state after my sister's near drowning. Gabriel stood in front of the judge's bench, looking perfect in a dark charcoal suit, his face wearing an expression of deep, tragic solemnity. Delphine was seated behind him in the front row, looking elegant in black lace. "Your Honor," Gabriel said, his voice echoing in the mahogany-paneled room, "my fiancée is suffering from a severe dissociative episode. She pulled her sister from the pool, but since then, she has disappeared with her, refusing medical attention and ignoring my calls. She is putting her sister and the estate in extreme danger. We need to freeze the assets and transfer their administration to my firm immediately." The judge, an elderly man with thick glasses, sighed. "This is a very serious charge, Mr. Osei. Do you have any supporting evidence regarding her instability?" "I have her psychiatric files from her previous therapy sessions," Gabriel said, pulling a leather binder from his briefcase. He did not know that those files were forged by his own paid clinical associates. The heavy wooden double doors at the back of the courtroom swung open. I walked in. I wore a tailored navy suit, my hair pinned back, my eyes clear and steady. Behind me was Xavier Beaumont carrying a black silver-rimmed briefcase. "I do not think those files will be necessary, Your Honor," I said, my voice carrying throughout the courtroom, completely clear of any emotion or panic. Gabriel turned around, his eyes widening. "Anais, thank God. Where have you been? You need to come with me to the clinic right now." He stepped toward me, his hands reaching out to grab my shoulders in that familiar, suffocating gesture of protection. I stepped back, allowing 2 county sheriffs to move between us. "Please keep your distance, Mr. Osei," I said. Xavier walked past him, placing his briefcase on the defense table. "Your Honor, we have filed an emergency counter motion regarding the Larkspur estate. We also have sub-jurisdictional evidence of financial wire fraud, conspiracy to commit murder, and corporate embezzlement." "This is ridiculous," Gabriel laughed, turning to the judge. "This is exactly the kind of paranoid delusion I was warning you about, Your Honor." The judge raised his hand. "Let them speak, Mr. Osei. What evidence do you have, Mr. Beaumont?" Xavier opened a sleek metallic laptop and plugged it directly into the court's high-definition projection system. On the main wall screen behind the judge, a crystal-clear video file began to play. It was the underwater footage from June 12th. The resolution was perfect. The courtroom fell into a heavy, suffocating silence as the video showed Delphine Kowalski clearly pulling the safety pins out of Cleo's life vest. The camera caught the precise movement of her fingers. It caught her cold, unbothered expression as she watched the 7-year-old child plunge into the deep end, then walk away without offering help. Next to the pool screen, a second window opened, showing Gabriel Osei in his office on June 10th, captured by his own security cameras which Xavier had subpoenaed under the corporate embezzlement audit. His voice came through the court speakers, clear and loud. If the sister has her accident this week, Anais will be too broken to care about any lawyer. Delphine stood up in the gallery, her face turning gray. This is a fabrication. That footage has been manipulated. She turned to run toward the back exit, but 2 federal marshals were already waiting at the double doors. Her high heels clicked frantically on the hardwood before they grabbed her arms. Gabriel stared at the projection, his mouth open, his skin turning a sickly yellow-white. The elegant structure of his lies was collapsing in front of him, second by second, and there was nothing his soft voice could do to save him. We have also submitted the SEC wire transfer receipts, Your Honor, Xavier said, handing a thick stack of blue-bound documents to the bailiff. Mr. Osei and Ms. Kowalski had already accepted a $12 million deposit from a European shipping conglomerate to sell off the Larkspur assets, using the sister's death as the legal catalyst for estate liquidation. The judge looked at the video, then at Gabriel, then back at the SC files. His face went red with disgust. The petition for conservatorship is denied, the judge spoke, his gavel slamming down like a gunshot. Mr. Osei, Ms. Kowalski, you are remanded to the custody of the state without bail pending formal grand jury indictment for attempted murder and wire fraud. Gabriel turned his eyes toward me. They were no longer the eyes of a protective fiancé. They were the empty, hateful eyes of a predator who had finally been caged. Anais, you think you've won, he spat as the marshals cuffed his hands behind his back. You are nothing without me. Your family's company will rot. I stood there, feeling the wind from the open court windows blow against my skin. I did not feel the phantom prick of the needle in my shoulder anymore. I did not smell the damp concrete of the ward. You are wrong, Gabriel, I whispered, loud enough only for him to hear. I am exactly who my father built me to be, and you are just another name on a court record. He was dragged out of the room, his shoes dragging along the wooden floorboards, while Delphine wept hysterically in her handcuffs. I walked out of the court into the warm afternoon sun. The air was thick with the scent of green leaves and fresh salt ocean breezes. Xavier was standing next to his car, his hand resting on the open passenger door. He did not smile, but the warmth in his eyes was undeniable. It is over, Inez, he said, they cannot touch you. I walked to the passenger seat and sat down. For the first time in 30 years, the water was behind me and the future was wide, clear and mine to build. Did she go far enough, or was she still too merciful? Comment justice if the ending was perfect. Comment harder if you wanted an even colder revenge. Your comments decide how ruthless the next ending should be. Like and subscribe if you want to be here for the next story. We drove away from the Suffolk County Courthouse, the tires humming against the smooth asphalt, but my mind was not yet ready to rest. Xavier kept his eyes on the road, his hands gripping the steering wheel with a quiet tension that matched my own. We both knew that a legal victory in a preliminary hearing was only the first wave of a much larger battle. Gabriel's firm had deep connections with some of the most influential political families in New York, and his brother was a senior partner at a white-collar defense agency. Within minutes of our departure, Xavier's phone began to vibrate on the console, displaying a succession of restricted numbers from Manhattan and Albany. He tapped the screen to slide the call into voicemail without looking down. They are already trying to negotiate a settlement before the grand jury convenes tomorrow morning, Xavier said, his voice flat. His brother has filed an emergency petition for a habeas corpus hearing, claiming the pool footage we presented was illegally obtained and violated privacy laws. They will try to argue that the hidden cameras were a violation of state surveillance statutes, because the beach club pool is technically private property, I said. I looked out the window at the salt marshes of Peconic Bay, the dark reeds swaying in the wind. But they do not realize I signed the maintenance and security waiver as a primary shareholder on the 1st of June. I had meticulously prepared for this legal loophole during my first week back in this timeline. By using my real name to register as an active administrator of the estate beach club, I had given myself the absolute right to install safety and monitoring equipment without board approval. Xavier glanced at me, a subtle trace of admiration softening his sharp features. You thought everything nice, but you need to understand how these people operate when their survival is on the line. Gabriel has a contingency fund that is not listed in any of his firm's corporate ledgers. In my 30 years of torment in that sanitarium during my past life, Gabriel had visited me on the anniversary of Cleo's death, drunk on his own untouchable wealth. He had stood over my restrained body, boasting about a private vault box at the North Fork Trust in Greenport. He told me he had used my own maiden name and social security number as a secondary executor to hide 80,000 physical bearer bonds and several digital currency keys from his first SEC audit. He had thought I would die in that padded room, taking his dirty financial secrets to the grave, but that knowledge was now a razor-sharp scalpel in my hands. Turn the car toward Greenport, Xavier, I said, my voice cutting through the hum of the engine. We need to go to the bank before his brother's legal team frozen my secondary administrative access. Xavier did not ask questions. He simply moved the car into the turning lane, the tires throwing up wet gravel as we pivoted onto the northern highway. The sky was darkening now, heavy purple clouds rolling in from the Atlantic, threatening a second summer storm. We pulled up to the historic limestone facade of the North Fork Trust just 20 minutes before closing. The grand brass-trimmed doors felt incredibly heavy as I pushed them open, the interior of the bank smelling of polished marble, ozone, and old paper. The branch manager, a gray-haired man named Harrison who had managed my father's commercial shipping accounts for 3 decades, stood up from his desk when he saw me walk in. Anais, my dear, I heard about the trouble at the courthouse today, he said, his voice lowering to a conspiratorial whisper. I was sorry to hear about your father, and now this terrible business with young Gabriel. I need to access Vault Box 742, Mr. Harrison, presenting my driver's license along with the original estate trust certificate. I am the sole surviving administrator, and I need to retrieve my family's physical security documents immediately. Harrison adjusted his reading glasses, scanning the digital ledger on his screen. Of course, Gabriel registered this box under joint tenancy 3 years ago. Your name is listed as a primary secondary executor, with independent signature rights. He slid the heavy steel vault key across the counter toward me, his hand warm and dry. Xavier stayed in the lobby, standing near the glass doors to keep watch for any legal messengers from the Osei family. I followed the armed guard down into the quiet basement vault, my heels clicking on the reinforced steel floor. The vault room was intensely cold, the walls lined with thousands of identical stainless steel security doors. The guard inserted the bank's master key into box 742, then stepped back to give me privacy. I took the small brass key, my hand completely steady, and turned it in the lock. The cylinder clicked with a solid, mechanical sound that echoed like a tiny explosion in the quiet vault. I pulled the long metal box out and carried it to the private viewing table. Inside, wrapped in black velvet, was a heavy leather binder containing $3 million in high-yield bearer bonds, several legal documents detailing his illegal shell company formations, and 3 small silver hardware wallets with printed password strings. There was also a small physical notebook filled with handwritten dates, initials of local public officials, and exact monetary amounts. This was Gabriel's private bribery ledger, his personal shield against any local investigation. My breath caught in my throat as I turned the pages, seeing the names of the very judges and state attorneys who had signed my institutionalization papers in my past life. They had all been bought with my own family's shipping trust dividends. I slid the entire ledger and the hardware wallets into my leather bag, replacing the metal box in its steel shelf. I did not touch the bearer bonds. Those would be seized by the federal prosecutors anyway, but the evidence of political corruption was mine to wield. When I walked back out into the lobby, Xavier was looking at his phone, his jaw set in a hard, dangerous line. His defense lawyers just arrived at the district court with an injunction to block your access to his personal assets, he said, looking at my leather bag. They are 15 minutes too late, I said, a cold smile touching my lips. Let's go to the Suffolk County District Attorney's office. We are going to make sure Gabriel's high-priced defense attorneys have no money left to pay for their billable hours. The district attorney, a sharp-faced woman named Victoria Thorne, was sitting in her office when Xavier and I presented the bribery ledger and the hard drives. She spent 20 minutes turning the pages of the handwritten book, her face hardening with every name she recognized. This changes everything, Ms. Larkspur, Thorne said, looking up from the desk, her fingers tapping against the black leather binder. This isn't just a corporate fraud or domestic murder case anymore. This is a systemic federal corruption investigation. I will personally petition the state Supreme Court to hold Gabriel Osei without any possibility of bail. With his bribery ledger in the hands of the state and his secret accounts emptied, Gabriel's expensive legal team withdrew their representation before midnight, citing non-payment of retainers and a clear conflict of interest. The next afternoon, the sky had finally cleared, leaving the air fresh and cool over the island. I sat on the covered porch of our family estate, watching Cleo paint a bright blue harbor scene on a small wooden canvas. Xavier walked up the wooden stairs carrying a fresh cup of coffee, his gray linen shirt catching the salt breeze. Gabriel was transferred to the federal holding facility at Riverhead this morning, he said quietly, leaning his back against the white wooden railing. His brother is being investigated by the Federal Bar Association for conspiracy, and Delphine's bail has been set at $5 million, which she cannot pay. They will never see the outside of a federal penitentiary, Xavier, I said, taking a sip of my coffee, feeling the warm liquid settle in my chest. Xavier looked down at Cleo, then back at me, his eyes filled with a deep, silent understanding that did not require any grand words. You saved her, Anais. You saved your family. What are you going to do with the shipping company now? I watched Cleo's tiny brush strokes, the vibrant colors of her painting reflecting the sunlight. We are going to rebuild, I said. We are going to build a harbor where the water is clean, the cameras are unnecessary, and my sister can swim without ever being afraid of what is hidden in the dark. Did she go far enough, or was she still too merciful? Comment justice if the ending was perfect. Comment harder if you wanted an even colder revenge. Your comments decide how ruthless the next ending should be. Like and subscribe if you want to be here for the next story.